Something big is shifting. You can feel it. You want to stay informed, but you also want to smash your phone. I'm Allison Hare, a podcast strategist, and this is Culture Changers. Here is where we talk with smarts and snark about all the stuff they say not to talk about: power, politics, religion, relationships through the lens of pop culture. And of course, we are talking about cults and tradwives too. If you're wondering what to do with all of this, you might just be a culture changer. How does the podcast get so big? When you think of your favorites, some of them get big so fast, and sometimes it seems like it is out of nowhere. And why is that? And a lot of times it comes down to really three things. One is, how is it structured? The other one is it sticky? Is there stickiness and psychology? And obviously you have to have an interesting piece of that. I'm doing a new feature on this podcast, and it is called Phenom Playbook, where what we're going to do, and we're going to do this probably about once a month, is I want you to submit to me your favorite podcasts that are huge, the ones that you love to listen to, the ones that just ring your bell, or ones that everybody loves, but you can't stand and you are not sure why. Or maybe you are sure why. But I would love to hear those. You can send me an email at culturechangerspod@gmail.com. Tell me what you're listening to. Maybe I will profile it on a future show. But I'm very excited about this, and we are going to determine one of three things. Is it hook? Will it hook you? Is it hype? Or is it a heavyweight? Is it in for the long haul? So we're going to have a lot of fun with this one. And this one I was super excited to profile. And the podcast, the first one that we're going to profile, is called I've Had It. Have you guys heard of this podcast? It actually is two podcasts. There's I've Had It, which is a top 0.01% globally ranked. It is the highest you can get in terms of ranking of what that looks like. And they really have seen a meteoric rise, specifically in the past year. And then there's the second podcast, which I think was launched later last year. And it's called I Hip News. I've had a podcast, I Hip News. So those are released 3 times a day, whereas the full podcast, I've had a podcast, I think, is released twice a week. So let's talk about it. In this segment, it's called the Phenom Playbook, and we are really going to dive deep into the psychology of how this show is formed and how is it shaped and what are the features of it that if you are somebody that wants a podcast or is just really interested in it, it's going to be super fascinating to you for you to hear. And kind of, you're never going to listen to podcasts the same because you're going to be listening through a different lens. And when I think about I've had a podcast, this podcast, my goodness, it got on my radar probably like a month ago. But what's happened is they have grown at such a fast clip. And a little bit on the history of this. So this podcast was started by 2 best friends. Their names are Jennifer Welch and Angie. Her nickname is Pumps, Sullivan. And so these two have been best friends for like 30 years. And they were on a short-lived Bravo, I believe, reality show called Sweet Home Oklahoma. So you may know about these. They're 2 blonde women, very pretty. They are from a very deep red state of Oklahoma, were raised in this community. And they started this podcast called I've Had It because they kind of did what a lot of people started out, but they happen to take off. Most people don't when it starts out this way. But they would talk on the phone every night and they would essentially just like have a bitch fest. And their kids are like, you guys should start a podcast. But what is interesting about them is they are so outrageously funny. They are so funny, but they are so cutting. And the way that they talk, like they just do not mince words. And they are exceptionally sharp, smart, bright, and fast. So I can't wait to jump into this one because there is a little bit of shock value. I will tell you to brace yourself when you hear about how these two open the show. So the way they are, their backgrounds are Jennifer Welch was an interior designer, and Angie was a lawyer. They started this podcast a couple of years ago where they would talk about what they call petty grievances, right? And so they talk about positive and petty grievances, and episode after episode of unmitigated rage. What does that mean? What does that mean? So when you think about petty grievances, they always had kind of a political undertone, but I would say it was probably, kind of random stuff that was funny and it would get a good audience. But I think probably about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, they kind of went 90% politics. They went all in on politics and they're very progressive. They call themselves the top DEI podcast. Um, and they shot through the roof. And I promise you that if you're watching this on YouTube and I show you the images and the clips, you're going to be like, I know those girls. I've seen them because almost so many of their clips go viral because of the stuff that they say. So what's interesting about them are a couple things. One is they open every show with this.
Patriots, gay triots, they triots, black triots, brown triots, and the MAGA triple Trumpers can do what, Pumps?
Fuck off! Fuck off! It's actually really fun to say. Oh, I love it. What it does is it signals a couple of things. So one, it starts to show a unique language. So yes, there may be some culty vibes in this, but I think what the good thing about like almost creating your own language or almost creating your own vernacular is that's what helps people kind of decide of like being an in group, right? So there are some ties to the cult stuff with it, but let's pretend this is not a cult. But when you are, so I'm a podcast strategist, right? And so I teach people how to launch podcasts that are integrated with their business, built around their thought leadership. So I do this day in and day out with people. What's great about them is they are just unfiltered in a lot of ways. They also have very deep Southern accents. So it's almost jarring to see people that look like they are probably Republican, conservative, religious women because they look like, middle of America, white women, white privileged women. But man, they've got foul mouths. And when they open the show and they open with this, it is very jarring. I know that Fox News melts down when they are essentially destroying people on the right and on the left as well, because they look like them. They look like people that are watching Fox News, but they're not. So they have a huge. I think they were showing that their base of their listeners are 50-50 men to women. And they have a really large Black listenership, which I thought was amazing, especially for white women that are also fighting for them. So, like they talk about, this was written in Rolling Stone magazine, that Jennifer Welch said, we talk about grievances, combining that with performative politics and just all around Trump fuckery. It's so overwhelming living in this fascist regime. The podcast is a great way to make the news somewhat digestible and to help our community that we've built stay engaged. So they have interviewed people like former President Barack Obama, Elizabeth Warren, new mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani, Kamala Harris. They actually had a public, like a face-off really with Cory Booker that they really had. They had Cory Booker on. They challenged him with it. And what's interesting about these two ladies is, yes, they lambast the conservative community, the right-leaning people. but they are the same, if not more unforgiving for Democrats, and especially establishment Democrats that will not speak up, which is what brings up the more interesting thing about this show. First of all, like the detonating language that they use. I'm going to play a clip of like some of the insults that they use. They use nicknames for everything. They call Donald Trump Kankles McTaco Tits, and they shorten it to Kanks. They call JD Vance, I think they call him like Smoky Psychopath or something. And they continuously call him a prostitute. And they use really, really strong language because it is visceral, it is sticky. They're essentially using Trump's playbook, truly, to help people understand what the challenge is, what the problem is. They explain it in a way that is so visceral. And I'm going to play a little clip for you now.
This shit when the felon is the teeny weeny mushroom cock piece of shit, Kankles. And shame on every single American that voted for this lying sack of shit.
In private, I think he's with the ball gag getting pegged.
Nobody wants to see your fucking smug ass, teeny weeny pinkle. Here's a picture of Trump out of drag at Mar-a-Lago.
So using these nicknames, and I've actually heard these nicknames being used as normal vernacular outside of this podcast. It's easy to remember, just like Crooked Hillary or Lion Ted or whatever it is that Trump had said. It is the same concept. And so I had seen these ladies. I'd seen clips of them because so many of them are going viral. And I thought when I first heard it, like, do we really need the insults? Like, does that really help anybody? And then I heard Jennifer Welch on Kara Swisher's podcast on. Kara Swisher is a really respected, revered, and very, very sharp and feared tech journalist that comments often about politics, culture, and technology. And she had Jennifer Welch on. And when I heard her interview and heard her talk about why she uses the insults, why name calling, I was sold. I was like hook, line, and sinker. I so respect this woman. And then when you hear her talk and how fast she thinks and how smart she is, I was floored by it. You may not agree. That's okay. Like whatever you believe is fine with me. But I think it is important to be honest about where we stand. And her point in this was that if Republicans won on offense and Democrats lost because they played down the middle. They aren't speaking up. They are the morality police, right? They aren't they are trying not to piss anybody off. They're trying to be so inclusive. And Jennifer and Pumps are like, fuck that. We need to go full board offense. Because if we're going to win, we cannot do it from the middle. We need to play fire with fire. I think it's an interesting approach. And when I hear how this works, let me kind of give you the breakdown of it. One is using some of the terms that they use, like patriots, gaytriots, theytriots, browntriots, all of the things that they use, and the fuck off, right? Like it is so catchy, and it creates more of an instant in-group language. You know who you're talking to, right? There's so much humor that's built into it too, because the jabs are so hard and fast and really funny. Like the way they describe it is really, really funny. Like the JD Vance thing about him being a prostitute. So essentially, wherever money comes from, he will change and flip-flop his values And they do not mince words at all about the behavior around JD Vance. Same thing goes for Chuck Schumer, for Cory Booker, for other people that are establishment Democrats that are not doing enough and are literally losing for Democrats. So how do we come together in all this? So I think because of the tone that they use, first of all, it sets the tone, especially opening the show. We are the top DEI podcast. You know, what have you had it with, right? And so they kind of start off and open the show. What is it that you've had it with? And I will say, there's so much to be said about the rage that we feel on any given day. Now, I'm going to not assume you feel the way that I do. But let's say there is no world where you open up social media, TV, it doesn't matter. You open up anything that opens you to media. When you see a cute cat followed by somebody getting murdered in cold blood, and then you see another baby being born and something very sweet, and then some other catastrophe happening, some hate crime that you see. And this is all day, every day, all day, every day. How in the world do you think we're going to be regulated? And I feel like if I'm kind of tapping into the culture, what I feel like is that there was a feeling years ago, George Floyd, you know, all the things that we're kind of seeing come up again and again and again and again. There was a feeling of helplessness and hopelessness. And there is a lot of that despair that is coming now. When you're seeing murder and hearing about mass shootings and Epstein files and, you know, like victims being dismissed, diminished, all of this unbelievably cruel and unfair injustice where literally our democracy is crumbling. The foundations of what this country was built on is no longer on terra firma. And in fact, all of it appears to be crumbling down. So am I somebody that feels like the sky is falling? I don't know. But I feel like the vibe is it's no longer time to sit on the sidelines. And so as you have this pent up rage and this energy of what do we do with it all? Because there is no way to be regulated. I mean, you can meditate all fucking day. You can say, what I focus on expands, and I'm going to only focus on what I control. Bullshit. You can control a lot more. And a lot controlling is not burying your head in the sand. Now, I'm saying that, and that may piss you off, and that's okay. What I'm not saying is yes, you have a job to do. You have kids to take care of. There are days when you just have to shut it off. That's not what I'm saying. But I want you to feel like you are equipped and you have more of a voice. And part of a show like this, whether it's Culture Changers or I've had a podcast, is it almost feels like having somebody else say the thing. It makes you feel like, okay, it's not just me. I'm not crazy. And these people are angry. It almost feels like a permission slip to say the thing. And that part has a lot of value when you think about being bold and saying what needs to be said. The profanity and the name calling, all of that is part of the strategy. And I think it's part of who they are. I think it is that rage of seeing it come out in a way that is more empowering than it is, oh, that's fun to listen to. It almost makes you feel like if there is an uprising, if we rise up together, it's kind of like protesting. I was listening this morning to Rachel Maddow, and Rachel Maddow was being interviewed. I forget on what it was. And they asked her, does protesting work? And she said, yes. Personally, I feel like protesting brings awareness. It makes people feel good in the moment, but does it change a vote? Does it change things? And what she said was that there are studies that if 3.5% of the population protest, like actively push back, there is no stopping the train of change. 3.5% doesn't sound like a lot. And that feels more empowering, right? And so when you have a podcast that is using the platform to rattle you, but not rattle you where you don't know what to do with it, they're giving you a playbook. And that part I think is really valuable. What do you do with all this energy? How do you put it into action? And some of it is like having words to describe how you feel, or having words to be able to describe how do you move forward with it. Are they right? I don't know. Are any of us right? I just did an episode last week about the news and trends of the news. And what was abundantly clear is nobody trusts only one source. And everyone is trying to corroborate their data and figure out what their sense of the truth is, whether it's right or wrong. I don't know that we will know. There is no monoculture anymore. And so we heavily rely, and all the data shows this too, on personality-driven podcasts, accounts, social media, YouTube channel. All of that is really important. And so because this podcast went all in on the political part of it, it showed meteoric growth. There is another thing that I think is important to note as a podcaster and analyzing and psychologically evaluating this podcast is one thing, like I mentioned before, when you play it down the middle, when you play it safe, you become forgettable. You just do. So what do you need? What do you need? One is a point of view, and the other part is proof. And what that means, the point of view, you have to have an opinion. That doesn't mean that you have to go on the offense, but it does mean you have to have a position and a stance, because people will either hear it. And so there are people that love to listen to, I've had a podcast or I have news. And there's some people that love to hate it and they hate listen. And there is value to that too. Some people are trying to see what are the opposing beliefs. Why do they believe that way? In my world, I cannot understand why the shootings in Minneapolis, I cannot it's so ironclad to me that if you watch the video, that it so clearly was murder from the ICE agent to this woman. So how could it be ironclad? Like, how could somebody think differently? But on the other side, there are people that can't understand why I believe the way I believe. Even though we saw the same video, we have different facts, right? So are they facts? So that point of view plus proof. What are the credentials? What are the sources? What makes you credible? I think because they are so fast, and the way they explain things makes so much sense to me. And because they use such graphic language and visceral visuals in the way that they make a point, it makes so much sense. And then they can back it up with what are the sources? Where did this come from, right? So point of view plus proof is really important. Offense over defense. And so they go on offense and they make no apologies for it. And if, there was some clip that Jennifer was saying where she was saying, if you're like, what happened to these women? They're foul mouths. They are, they don't believe, they voted differently. They're progressive. And she's like, we are not your people. We are not your people. And that is okay. They want to go on the offense because they know that is how you change minds and hearts. How do you do it? So I love that they have this. So it becomes an emotional release for pent up rage. Nobody wins in the middle. So all of this becomes really fascinating when you think about how to structure a show. And I think the most important thing, obviously, if you're thinking about a show for yourself or the shows that you listen to, think about what make them so interesting. So like the point of view piece, if you're listening to Alex Jones, you may not agree with him. You may think he's a complete fucking wingnut, but you listen because you want to hear his point of view. You want to hear his perspective. It doesn't have to be right? Or it may not be something you agree with, but that's what keeps people listening is your point of view. And so as a podcast strategist, I work with people where I am constantly working with them to help them own their voice. And by that, I mean, it's natural to want to mimic what you've heard already on another podcast. It is natural. What isn't so natural is expressing how you really feel and saying in a way that feels completely true and genuine and authentic to you. That's how you find your people. That is how you find your people 100% of the time. And I think if you're listening to this, that you are probably somebody that believes in justice, believes in honesty, believes in doing the right thing, whether you agree with me or not. I believe that we want the same things. And it is important to back up your sources and make sure that what you're coming with is right. So what I want to do are two things. One is, if you are interested in having your own podcast, and then we're going to get into, is this hooked, hype, or heavyweight, right? If you do have a podcast or you are wanting a podcast and you want me to help you build it, or you're looking for support to build your podcast, I'm offering a free clarity call. There's no obligation to it, where you and I can just talk about your ideas. And if it is something that you want some help and it makes sense for us, we can go forward and I can tell you what that looks like. Or it could be where you're just looking to flesh out an idea. And maybe I'm not the best fit, and that's okay. I'll point you in the right direction. But you can do that at AllisonHair.com/free call. Okay. So when I think of I've had a podcast, does it leave you hooked? Is it hype? Meaning it'll probably burn out. Or is it a heavyweight? Meaning it is there for the long haul. When I think of I've had it, I think of hooked. Is it going to be there forever? I don't think it's hype. I think it's got real meat in it. Is it going to last forever? I don't know. And the only reason I say that is because of the political nature and the moment that we're in right now calls for aggressive language and ways to fight back. Will that always be the way? I don't know. And even when I think about and reflect on my own journey of my podcast of going through a moment in time where my podcast has always been about changing the culture and finding ways that, kind of break status quo, because status quo kind of keeps us stuck. And so I took kind of a 2-year detour where I changed the name of the show. It had a lot more life coaching content. And then when I started to look back and I'm like, that was when Biden was in office, when there wasn't as much political turmoil than there is when Trump is in office, where it is a fucking utter shit show of chaos that we are trying to get through. We are trying to get through as best we can and do it together. That is my hope. And as we are in this moment where Trump is, I'm fighting like hell to use this platform as a way to not only help bring these incredible voices to you and the people that I interview and the thought leaders and people that are really changing the culture, but the design is for you to speak up and not be on the sidelines anymore. And whether it's through a podcast or doing something in your own world, that is a win for me. And that is my hope for you as we wrap up, but I hope that you enjoyed this episode and enjoy I've Had It podcast. I will link all of their info if you're interested in it. I would love to get your feedback on shows that I should feature. Again, you can go to culturechangerspod@gmail.com, submit your entry and your name, and I may feature it and you in a future episode where we break down the psychology, the structure, the strategy, and the stickiness of the top podcasts that are out there. But as always, thank you for listening. And with all of this energy that you have, take a moment to breathe through it, but use that energy as a force for good. If you liked today's episode, there are several ways to support the show. As an independent media creator, your engagement helps me continue to make it for you and keep it free. First, please rate and review the show on the platform where you listen. Also, I'm on YouTube, so if that's your jam, go there too. And consider sharing this episode with a friend or 5. That's how it grows, by sharing these ideas. Second, please sign up for my email where I send out a short personal note to you every week, and always with a sprinkle of snark and some best finds. You can sign up at allisonhair.com/email. As always, thanks for listening, and let's rise up because we are culture changers.